Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Tonight is a packed show. I will tell you that for now. Lots of pondering, lots of detail, a fair bit of intel of what's going on. Obviously a reference to last night's show in the opening song, Who's Got My Back Now? Well, it's up to the people who profess to love the country known as America, which has been hijacked by a corporation known as USA Inc., to really stand up for the country and the people. Like I said, I will cover more of that later, but we've got a fairly packed show to go through. Intel, all kinds of pieces on... where are we going with that? The control structure will be replayed tonight and updated, what it was. Some insider stuff, what's going on with the Roths. What else have we got? Sleep issues, time, ADHD, and suicide, Ronald Bernhard, and a whole heap more to cover. And Source Energy. So it's packed, and that's why I ended up doing the show last night. Like I said, I'll mention more of that later. Right, let's get into the details of the show. And we've got a new link to add, which I'll be covering shortly. Why it was done and how you can go forward with it. Anyway, the link for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. We also have the articles website called thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. That's got the ground and centering and shielding that we prepared for all the members, and all kinds of other stuff of self-empowerment, and all the archives of the show, and you can also listen live there. It's been it's increased in popularity over the last few months, and the biggest shows that we've done to do with the factions and the parents and the covens are all in the must listen to section. So if you want to catch up on what this show's all about, listen to them. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and a Facebook all social media alternative called MeWe, MEWE.com. And if you're struggling to connect with that, send an email to this address, where you can also send comments for the shows or questions for the shows. And it's truth.honor.and.integrity@gmail.com. Honor is spelt the American way without the U, so they can't remind you of the We have the People's Club donations website at thepeoplesclub.org. Now, recently I've had a couple of rough days in work, and it's becoming a drain on me. It's, I think most people realise it takes a lot of time to compile these shows each week. It may be 3 hours long, but the preparation of it may be 10 to 20 hours long, depending on the content. Last night itself took 3 hours to prepare, and about 45 minutes to read out. So it takes a lot of my time, and I'm involved in so many other things, some of which has been mentioned on the shows, and others that are not mentioned for safety and security reasons. And people have been asking me over a while, they wanted to send me money, and I held out and said, no, just send it to the foundation. But the job is becoming a strain. I'm getting bored, particularly after my recent trip, and so it was decided that I would finally give in and do a Patreon, which may disappoint some. I'm not overly comfortable with it myself, being that I've kind of fought against it, but with the volume of members asking for it, in the end I thought, well, let's see how it goes. So the idea is for me to reach a monthly target where I can quit the day job and focus on the shows all week, and also have some time for myself, which is completely zero at the moment, and do some of the hidden work more often. You know, I am getting called on to do a lot more of the things. Like I say, most of it is not covered in the shows. And so the Patreon was set up last Sunday, and I'm kind of humbled at the response. It's a fantastic response from the members, and like I said, I'm humbled by it, and I appreciate every donation. Now, the idea behind it is Patreon is kind of an exclusive. So those that can afford to pay get exclusive access. This is not something that appeals to me, and why I've fought against it. And so, ideally for me, the way I would like Patreon to work is for the Patreon to reach its goal and change nothing as it is now. So people wouldn't be waiting 2 or 3 days whilst the paid members get to watch it ahead of time because they can afford it. It never sat well with me, that, you know, the whole ethos of THI is we're all in it together, you know, whether you can afford it or not. No one will, I hope no one will flag it up. Well, you know, if they haven't paid and I have, why should I? Or don't. But that's not the right attitude for us all going forward, you know. And so the ideal goal for me is to obviously reach the goal that's been set, which just covers my basic expenses, and then I can quit the job, and we will get the Spreaker access the same, the YouTube the same, and I'm also going to be putting out the intel and the op-ed pieces for each show, including a back catalogue going back to July of last year at various intervals, so then everyone can see it. Now, the idea is to help us all, and no one should feel bad or feel left out because they can't afford it. There's many people struggling financially at this time, and I do understand it, but I don't want it to be an exclusive club. But initially, it's kind of an encouragement for people to sign up on, and once target is reached, then we can revert to plan A. But I'm hoping we don't have to revert, we can just carry on. Now, the shows for this month will stay the same as it is now, live every Thursday, and I'm hoping it stays that way. We've still got the final details of Patreon to be worked out, but it is important to me no members miss out, and I mean no members. Now, I'm pleased to hear that some members wanted to sponsor others, but as it stands, Patreon doesn't allow that for that to take place. So, as it stands now, you can't really sponsor other members, and that's why I would like everything to stay the same as we reach the goal and we just carry on. So there's no need to delay anything, and everyone has 100% access to everything. So, like I said, it's all about me just covering my working expenses. It's not a high earner, as you can see. And any balance set over a certain amount would automatically transfer to the foundation, not me. This is not about enriching me. You know, if I get enough, then I quit the job and then any overbalance will go into the foundation anyway. Now, those who have pledged monthly to the foundation can leave that pledge to go to the foundation, or you can transfer it to Patreon. It's your choice. Like I said, unfortunately, there's no sponsoring members on Patreon. But we will work around it, and I don't want it to be an exclusive members club. It's not what I or we're about. So, let's see if we can reach the goal. But I'm eternally grateful for the donations to date. Like I said, I'm kind of humbled by it. But people kept asking, so... But I'm slowly but surely trying to get used to it, but it is a bit difficult. So thanks to all of you. Anyway, the link for that, if you want to participate, is www.patreon.com. That's Patreon /Tommy W. And then you can go and pledge. It's up to you. There's two. Patreon asked me to set pledges, and the first one is access to all the shows, and the second one is for the transcripts of the shows. So we set it at $5 and $7.50. If you want to put 10 in, you want to put 20 in, that's entirely up to you. Every dollar to me, I'm grateful for. Right, let's get on with this show now. That's kind of packed, like I said. You thought last night was a booming show. We've got another one. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go into the news about the Patreon. I'm likely to be doing at least one video, not audio, video. Well, you'll hear me speak, and you'll all get to see that I told you I have the perfect face for radio. So at least once a month, once I've been able to quit work, I will do a 40-minute video at least once a month that will cover, go over a few points over the previous month, so we can remind people of what's taken place, or maybe the members can ask for certain topics to be discussed in there. Unfortunately, at the moment, it'll probably be helpful. I think 40 minutes is probably long enough on top of the other shows, but I'm hoping to do that at least once a month as well. Right, the Taliban. Fake armies that they are, all funded by the American people, decided this week that they would announce a 3-day ceasefire with the Afghan government forces, which coincides with Eid, some ceremony later this month, and days after a unilateral ceasefire was ordered by the government. Now, this is the first Taliban ceasefire since the government they ran was toppled by the 2001 US-led invasion. 17 years and we're still there, fighting a so-called ragtag army. Oh dear. Now, the Taliban said it will stop all offensive operations during the holiday except for against foreign forces. And earlier, Taliban fighters killed dozens of Afghan security members. And the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, said the Taliban move was an opportunity for the militants to realise their violent campaign was not winning them hearts and minds, but further alienating the Afghan people from their cause. I'm hoping, after certain events, that Mr. Trump decides finally to pull all our troops home. We have asked for him. Skullduggery going on in Iraq still. You think this was an accident? Oh, did I hear Langley? Maybe it didn't. Likely it did. A fire hit Iraq's biggest ballot paper warehouse that was being used to store votes ahead of a recount. You can't make this stuff up. And votes for the eastern district of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, were being held in the building. Go figure. It was stated it's not clear if voting papers have been destroyed or what caused the fire in the storage centre. And last month's legislative elections were won by an alliance headed by the populist Shia cleric Muqtada Sadri, and amid allegations of widespread fraud. No change there. On Wednesday, the Iraq Parliament requested a manual recount of around 10 million votes that were cast. Now, firefighters were attempting to control the fire at the storage site, which housed the ballot boxes of the Al-Rusafa district in the east of Baghdad. Interesting name there, Rusafa. An Interior Ministry spokesman told the news agency that the blaze had destroyed some documents and equipment, but efforts were being made to stop it from affecting the ballot boxes. However, Baghdad Province Council member Mohammed Al-Rabi told Reuters that all boxes and papers had been burned. It's a case of one part of the government not knowing what the other's doing. Sound familiar? Should be. Same people running it. Diplomacy cannot be dictated by fits of anger, according to the French President Emmanuel Macron, as he warned after the G7 summit in Canada ended in acrimony. In tweets last week, Donald Trump described host Justin Trudeau as dishonest and weak and retracted his endorsement of the joint communique. Now, that statement sought to overcome some deep disagreements, notably over trade. Yep, because we're sick of being looted, that's why. And Mr. Macron's office said France and other EU countries, who are all controlled by Rothschilds, take note, would maintain their support for the final G7 communique. Let's be serious and worthy of our people, he said. Yeah, right. We make commitments and keep to them. They are funny, though. And a statement from the French presidency, quoted by AFP News, said, "International cooperation cannot be dictated by fits of anger and throwaway remarks." Germany also said it would abide by the communique. No change there. I'll have more about the G7 later. Now, tens of thousands of people exercising people power again, this time in the autonomous Basque country of northern Spain, this week formed a human chain to push for greater autonomy. Now, the Basque people don't think they belong to Spain or France, and they are fighting for their own country to be sovereign. And the organisers say the length of the chain reached 125 miles. That's one way to slow down the economy. And linked the cities of San Sebastian and Bilbao with Vitoria, which is the seat of the Basque Parliament. The region has a higher degree of self-government than Catalonia, which has been seeking independence from Madrid. And support for outright Basque independence has fallen over the years. Many, though, believe the population should be given the right to vote over their future ties to Madrid. So that fight goes on. The difference, because they didn't come from here, is why. Direct evidence. Controversial, as far as I'm concerned anyway, dead billionaire George Soros is apparently up in arms. Maybe it's his clone about Donald Trump. Everyone's up in arms at Donald Trump, including the missile throwers, claiming the US leader wants to destroy the world. Yeah, by peace. These people are stupid. And according to whoever Mr. Soros is now, Mr. Trump needs to be kicked out of office. Donald Trump is the ultimate narcissist. Really, Mr. Soros, who is willing to destroy the world. And he told the Washington Post on Saturday and added that if the Democratic Party wins the general election this November in a landslide and proceeds with an impeachment, he would support removing the president from office. Now, the two share a history of bad blood dating back to the 2016 election, as he was one of the top backers of Trump's then main rival, known as Android. And Soros gave $10.5 million to her campaign, according to the DC-based Center for Responsive Politics. But after Trump's stunning victory, it was later reported that Soros lost nearly $1 billion in losses. Oops. And his life. Where are we next? Tesla. All's not too well in the new technology world. And Elon Musk is facing legal action from Tesla shareholders who have accused the visionary CEO of neglecting the needs of investors and using the tech company for his personal enrichment, no doubt. Days after some shareholders said the time had come to oust the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk faces yet another challenge, and a lawsuit has been filed in a Delaware court of chancery and unsealed on Thursday accuses Musk of swindling the company with his unprecedented $2.6 billion award, which was recently approved by the shareholders and calls for the removal of the board and the appointment of new directors to better reflect the interests of the shareholders. And the new Musk compensation plan is so large it dwarfs the pay package of every other public company CEO. The motion was submitted by one of the shareholders, and his compensation package approved by the shareholders in March consists of 20.3 million stock options to be granted in 12 installments if he reaches capitalization goals. And the allocation of each part of his compensation depends on whether he succeeds in reaching the set market value and other financial targets within designated timeframes. And the plan goes on and stipulates that in order to receive the more than generous compensation in full, Musk will have to remain CEO of the company and Chief Product Officer during that period. In addition, he will not be able to sell the options for 5 years after they are exercised, and the company's market value, which now stands at $60 billion, will have to reach 650 by 2028. Perhaps he needs to speak to Jeff Bezos. He seems to do that within 1 year, never mind 10. Which amounts to roughly 11-fold increase. Now, the plan could either make Musk the richest man alive or leave him without pay if he misses the ambitious targets, as neither salary nor bonuses are envisaged for him. Tesla said it, as in other news about Tesla, it now plans to cut 9% of its workforce as part of a restructure, probably to pay off the CEO. This is how it works. And it's intended to reduce costs and boost profitability. And the layoffs at Elon Musk's electric car company comes as it tries to increase production of its Model 3 sedan and turn a quarterly profit this year. Now, Tesla went on to say, said more than 3,000 cuts would affect mostly salaried employees, excluding workers producing its cars. Trouble in Tesla. This all plays into the Iran nuclear deal. There's no mention of nuclear in this article, but this is what it's really all about. Oil prices could be set to jump to $140 a barrel due to US sanctions against Iran and Venezuela, according to Iran's OPEC governor, Mr. Ardabili. And the Iranian official also criticized the reported request that the United States made of Saudi Arabia to help stabilize oil prices in case the sanctions against Iran drives up oil prices. Now, the day before Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal, a senior official of the Trump administration phoned Saudi Arabia to ask it to help keep oil prices stable should the US decision on Iran disrupt oil supply. Now, earlier this week, Bloomberg reported that the United States had quietly asked Saudi Arabia and several other OPEC nations to raise oil production by some $1 million barrels per day, which lowers the price. Basically, they're trying to play games with the oil prices. The cabal, which the Bush cartel are heavily involved in it, are getting oil out of Iran and Iraq at $25 a barrel. And then they're selling it, what for now, 60? Now, not only were they getting it at $25, they were trying to loot the rest of it and claim it, all of it, for free. And that is what some of the ISIS fun and games is all about. Taking over oil production sites and siphoning all the oil out for free. And yes, the prices at the pump for Americans who are sending their sons and daughters to do all that stuff keeps on going up, doesn't it? Doesn't go down, so we're getting zero benefit out of it. War crimes has reared its ugly head again. This time it's not American war crimes, but Australia's. The elite special air services have allegedly committed war crimes in Afghanistan. This is according to a leaked military inquiry. The document notes violence and a disregard for human life by servicemen and includes details of a confidential defence inquiry which was commissioned in 2016 by the Special Operations Commander Major General Jeff Sengelman. Nice German name there. Sorry, I can't help it. It just seems to be all these generals have all got German names. See, Kyle. And conducted by a Defence Department consultant. And it cites that Special Forces insiders who stated that the soldiers had practiced the unsanctioned and illegal application of violence during the operations, which extended to a complete disregard for human life and dignity. Now, citing some witnesses, the report said there was a pattern of cover-ups, real or imagined, and misdemeanours or more serious offences in the field, as well as a culture of drug and alcohol abuse. No surprise there. And it continues to say that at the very least there is no doubt that there are major issues of morale or performance, in addition to the alleged drug and alcohol issues and violence amongst operations. And the report also mentions, which again is familiar with things here in America, the perception of a complete lack of accountability at all times. Yes, indeed. Almost 2 years after Bayer, Nazis, first made an offer to acquire Monsanto, and almost 18 months after the German drug maker finally secured a $66 billion deal to buy out the agrochemical company, it was time last week to close the transaction. Listen to this closely. When it came to paying between Bayer and Monsanto, it became the largest all-cash acquisition in history. Bayer turned to JP Morgan. No surprise there either. A bank that had been conflicted out of advising on the original deal, and the US bank was entrusted with the unglamorous but enormously important work of collecting nearly $57 billion in cash from dozens of banks. Think about it. Spread across multiple time zones, aggregating it into a single account and alerting other parties. The remaining $9 billion was financed through asset sales, all before Monsanto shares opened for trading. 5 hours. $57 billion taken from dozens of banks. We're still looking into that. There's another rogue operation. Citigroup have now been split up. But the investment bank has announced it will shed up to half of its 20,000 technology and operations staff in the next 5 years. I wonder why. They're citing as machines supplant humans at a faster pace. The prediction by Jamie Forzay, or Farees, who's the president of Citi and the chief executive of the bank's institutional clients group, was the starkest amongst investment banking bosses in a series of interviews to mark the 10th anniversary of the financial crisis. Nice to know they're celebrating it, given they've all been paid out for it and bailed out. The public are not celebrating. Mr. Freezy said the operational positions, which make up almost 2/5 of the investment bank employees at Citi, were most fertile, nice terminology that, for machine processing. Again, nice terminology that they have. We've got 20,000 operational roles, and over the next 5 years, could you make it 10,000? He added in the comments that had echoes of former Deutsche Bank chief executive John Cryan claims that up to half of the German bank's workforce could be replaced by technology within 5 years. Yep. Or we could just replace the banks. So with 57 billion going out of banks this week, not going to connect the dots. I'm sure you have connected many yourself currently. But here's another one. South Korean cryptocurrency exchange CoinRail said it was hacked over the weekend, which sparked a steep fall in Bitcoin amid renewed concerns about security at virtual currency exchanges as global policymakers struggled to regulate trading in the digital asset. Oh dear. And in a statement on Monday, CoinRail said its system was hit by cyber intrusion, causing a loss of about 30% of the coins traded on the exchange. Now, it has been estimated that about 40 billion won, which is $37.25 million worth of virtual coins, were stolen. The Luxembourg-based Bitstamp Bitcoin was trading at around $6,790, which was down near 11% from Friday. So it's a steep drop, having fallen roughly 65% from its all-time peak around mid-December last year. I told you it would tumble. We thought it might have tumbled a lot further, but playing games, making sure people collect and then give over their cash, and then they steal it, which is what we've warned about it all along. How are we for time? This word of warning, this next story will likely upset some, or probably upset many. But like the Nexium thing that we highlighted last August, which is now being brought to light, this is something else that remains hidden and needs to be brought to light. But I thought I would warn you ahead of time, and it involves animals. There is a largely hidden, poorly regulated and highly profitable industry in the United States that has a gruesome function. Breeding dogs for the sole purpose of often tortuous experimentation, after which the dogs are killed because they are no longer of use. Americans frequently express horror of festivals in countries such as China and South Korea, where dogs are killed, cooked, and also eaten. Mainstream media outlets in the US routinely report with a tone of disgust on the use of dogs in those countries for food consumption. But in the US itself, corporations and academic institutions exploit dogs as well as cats and rabbits for excruciating experiments that are completely trivial and in most cases even useless, and that are just as abusive as the practices in Asia that have produced much moral indignation in the West. Now, according to the US Department of Agriculture, which was rather aptly named the Animal Usage Report, 61,000 dogs were used in the US for experimentation in 2016 alone. The reported number of all animals used for experimentation was 821,000 in 1 year. And that's the ones that get reported. Even when legal standards are adhered to, and often they are not, the report found, the permitted abuse to which these dogs are subjected to is horrifying. They are often purposely starved or put into a state of severe thirst to induce behaviour they would otherwise not engage in. They are frequently bred deliberately to have crippling, excruciating diseases, or sometimes are brought into life just to have their organs, eyes and other body parts removed and studied as puppies and then quickly killed. They are force-fed laundry detergents, pesticides and industrial chemicals to the point of continuous vomiting and death. They are injected with lethal pathogens such as salmonella or rabies. They have artificial sweetener injected into their veins that causes the dog's testicles to shrink before they are killed and exsanguinated. Holes are drilled into their skulls so that viruses can be injected straight into their brains, and all of this according to the legal people, is perfectly legal. Not in a civilized society, it's not. So let's highlight, like we highlighted NXIVM, let's get this company name highlighted. Ridgeland Farms Inc. RIDGLAN, which is one of the 3 largest firms in the US that provides beagles to research facilities, and it's located in Dane County, Wisconsin. Let's relocate them into jail. Now, they also provide dogs to research facilities that include the University of Wisconsin, highlight them as well, and the University of Minnesota, highlight them as well, and various colleges within the University of California system. Time that practice was like NXIVM was highlighted and shut down, methinks. Dane County, Wisconsin, Ridgeland Farms, shut them down. With rising violence, unfortunately, in South Africa, being a farmer has become a rather dangerous job, particularly if you're white, sadly. This is echoes exactly what I've mentioned in previous shows about what happened in Zimbabwe back in 1999-2000. Now, some of the South African farmers are now hiring Israeli special forces to teach them self-defense. It's got that bad. There were 74 farm murders and 638 attacks, primarily on white farmers, in the last 18 months. Current murder tendencies indicate that we will lose more people on farms than in the past 3 years. This is according to AfriForum's Ian Cameron. And the situation has forced white farmers to begin preparing themselves to survive a possible assault. And some of them turn to Edan Abolnik, who is a former member of Israeli Special Forces, who trains them in hand-to-hand combat and weapons handling. He said, "We teach them hand-to-hand combat, bush warfare, semi-bush warfare, urban warfare, and how to collect information. And the program costs about 20,000 rand per person, which is about $1,500 for an intensive 2-week course." Now, the white farmers, despite being a minority in South Africa, own 72% of the country's farms. And the new South African government has recently announced a plan to redistribute land back to the black population. But critics have warned South Africa may repeat the disastrous experiment by the Zimbabwean government, which was formerly known as Rhodesia, back in 2000. And it basically plunged the country into famine. There was, there's been a lot of bad stuff done by white people in South Africa, but they have helped develop that country enormously. Now, after what happened in Rhodesia, I had family there at the time, and they got out rather quickly. And unfortunately, they just gave the blacks back the land that they previously owned. So if there was a roundabout or an intersection in the middle of a motorway, they just plunked themselves on it. And they were going to the toilet in the streets because that was their land and that's where they're staying. And they then went on to destroy all the farmland. It's not a bright thing to do. They destroyed all the crops and destroyed all the machines, and within 12 months the whole country was in famine. So the white people do play a role there and should be left. But, you know, let's not be threatening blacks like they have done. There's no need for it. The two can get work side by side without eliminating one or the other. It's old paradigm. Because if South Africa follows what happened in Zimbabwe, the South African people within 18 months will all be starving, and you're back to the way you were before the white race went there. You know? So it's about working in harmony, not eliminating one or the other. Last news bits went on for more than I thought. This is all about a difference between the elites here and a so-called communist country who doesn't look after its people elsewhere. But there's a chorus of voices from the Caribbean island of Barbuda who are accusing Robert De Niro of being part of a backroom effort to exploit a devastating hurricane to fundamentally change the island's commercial, communal land ownership law in the interest of developers. Currently it's under common law and common land. They want to change it and did so. And the changes were opposed by many of the Barbudans, but which could aid the actors' controversial plans to build a large luxury resort called Paradise Found Nobu. And early this month, with almost no international news coverage, no surprise there, and with the majority of Barbudans still displaced from the storm, an amendment to the law in question was quietly pushed through the Senate of Antigua and Barbuda. That's a body dominated by politicians from the wealthier and more populous island of Antigua. And if the amendment stands, a tradition of communal land rights that dates back to the abolition of slavery in 1834, which has protected Barbuda as a rare beacon of sustainable development in the Caribbean, will be extinguished. But as the news of the change trickles out, Barbudans are fighting back, challenging the legality of the amendment to the Barbuda Land Act, and they say the island's highest profile investor, Robert De Niro, stands to benefit most. It's just a scam to take away the land from the Barbudans so they can give it to people like Robert De Niro, said Mackenzie Frank, a former senator from the island, and anyone who has beach land is laughing all the way to the bank. Up until recent changes, land in Barbuda was held in common. It could not be bought or sold, and though developers could lease land for 50 years, their projects needed to win the consent of the majority of Barbudans. And it was a rare example of participatory economic planning and successful land redistribution to freed slaves and their descendants. Do I hear Puerto Rico being next? Think about it. Remember me telling you to draw the circle on the map? What they're doing is these people with the money are trying to create enclaves for themselves to get away from the so-called lower class, us. The lower class should step up and give them a real enclave to live in. Like, I know a nice island, fairly secluded, called Guantanamo. You want to live on an island with a beach view? We'll house you there. And that nasty country who gives its people nothing, makes them all dull and grey, and feeds them vodka all day, called Russia. Backward race, so we're told. They announced this week 48,000 requests have been received this week from Russian citizens responding to a state-backed program giving away a free hectare of land in the Far East. The program, approved by Russian President Vladimir Putin last May, is meant to populate and develop the region. Starting in February the 1st, any Russian citizen can claim their free hectare, which is 10,000 square meters of land in Russia's eastern and Pacific regions. About 28% of Russians interested in the program say they want to use the land to build a home, and about 17% want to use the land for agriculture or raise cattle, and another 7% they will use the land to build hotels and develop tourism. Now, the land can be used for any lawful purpose, and the new owners cannot rent, sell or give it away for 5 years. This is to stop the wealthy investors jumping in. And the current proposition is to offer about 2.5 acres of land to Russians and foreigners who want to build homes or start businesses in agriculture or tourism in the Far East. There are stipulations for foreigners, non-Russians, and will only be allowed to use the land, and full property rights can only be attained if the homesteaders naturalise as Russian citizens. Smart move. Russia's so-called Communist Party is now seeking to expand the proposed scheme to much larger territories in Siberia. And a poll by the British newspaper The Express found a majority of Brits want to emigrate to Russia after President Putin offered free land to people willing to settle the country's sparsely populated Far East. The British paper found that 78% of more than 22,000 respondents said yes, they would go. One respondent told the paper there was something romantic about the idea of homesteading in the Russian wilderness, and as soon as I read about it, my wife and I discussed it and are considering going. So that's what's going on in Russia. You know, those nasty Russians. And yeah, at home in America, it's forcing people out of regions like Miami, California, San Francisco, New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, Barbuda. I could go on. Due to overinflated prices of homes and rent. And it goes on in the UK also. They create expanding what is known as green space. In other words, their lords expand their land so you can't build on it. And yet we're told those nasty Russians are giving away land for free. Something not right with that narrative that we've been given, I think. I think we're all starting to learn that now. This next song's fitting. It's going to roll us right into the intel. Hi all, and welcome back. This intel will be as it was written and has a timeline. It will change during the course of it, but I need people to get an understanding of how things play out on a day-to-day basis. And obviously the main event was the missile that was fired at Air Force One to take it out of the sky, including Mr. Trump, which is why I ended up doing that show last night. But the first part of it, I will cover it all so you get the full details of what's going on. And it's fairly heavy. It's all about threats, but to me, it's a complete sign of their desperation. Now, the first part is Prince Charles, over here of the big ears in the palace, has been wielding his alleged authority again this week and tried to send mercenaries over to take Kim and the team out. That never turned out too well, and they were blocked from entering the country. But this is the type of things that are ongoing currently. Now, propaganda has gone into full swing also this week, with all kinds of claims, demands, threats flying about. And personally, I find it amusing, as to me it's a sign of their sheer desperation, basically to throw stuff out everywhere and hoping that some of it sticks. Well, it's not. So a raft of fake documents were thrown out on how the Chinese elders, who still to this day nobody knows who they are, they may not even exist, apparently own everything except they own Jack. Literally Jack. And then we had a new one. Japanese elders came forward with fake bonds, saying that the Fed has to make good on the old bonds. This goes back to the 1930s and all those Keenan bonds and stuff. And they also claimed that they owned the whole of America and all the gold. Yeah, right. And then in the same breath, they told Mr. Trump and the team that they wanted for Kim of Manor World Holding Trust extradited for stealing all their money. Well, the response was, well, if you have all this, what do you need her for? You have to laugh at their utter stupidity and hypocrisy. Kim stole all their funds, according to them. Really? Hello, McFly, fake elders. The funds belongs to the people, as it came from their labour. And most of you who are claiming it have never done a valid day's work in your lives. Zero. Just vampired off the public like the banks. So do us a favour with your whining of you own this and you own that. You don't. It's as simple as that. No one's buying your bullshit anymore. Now, as of writing this, they were using the meeting tomorrow, so that must have been Sunday or Monday, with Kim Jong-un, who was set up to be an Asian family bitch, to tell Trump which way this is going to go. And so depending on Trump's decision, either this will escalate and he fails miserably while the whole world is watching, and threats against America will escalate, or he agrees and signs everything they say and it will go well, according to them. So that was what the meeting initially was all about, except it didn't go that way. Let me make sure I'm quoting the right things. So Trump goes over there, and we sent a direct message to Trump on the tarmac, ahead of him boarding Air Force One, warning him of danger and preferably not to fly to Singapore, or it may even have been China. Either way, Trump decided to go ahead and meet up with the original Asian family's patsy, Kim Jong-un, to basically set up and humiliate Trump and America in the public glare. Well, that was the plan, but it didn't work out too well for the Rothschilds-led families group, but we'll have more about that later. So, Blackwater was in the mix, and Kim and Trump signed agreements, and it seems now that there was a lot coming to light about a military agenda and cooperation with Blackwater, which is now being run by Chinese generals known as the Black Dragon, aka Deep State One Faction Black Dragon, which is known as Kuomintang. These are military generals and nothing to do with President Xi, I might add. He wants them gone as well. Now, apparently this was all found out by good elements in the CIA and was revealed to Mr. Pompeo. And it turns out it worked in Trump's favour because we warned him ahead of time. So he knew what was coming and still wanted to go ahead. Now, I think, I'm speculating now, and I'll make that clear. I think, I know there was talks way ahead between Trump and Kim Jong-un. And although originally Kim may have been a patsy for the Asian families, I don't think that was the case when they turned up on Tuesday. In fact, I'm certain of it. But it is speculation at this point. On Sunday, a missile was launched out of a naval base of Whidbey Island in Washington State in an attempt, according to all sources, to knock Air Force One and President Trump out of the sky, due to a change of narrative between Trump and Kim Jong-un. So basically, a peace deal was worked out long before Trump left, and Kim went against the Asian families instead, and peace broke out between the two countries. They obviously got wind of it. We got wind of what they were up to, and so it was a game of cat and mouse. Now, Trump was being flanked or guarded by the rogue Black Dragon groups, so they knew exactly where he was at all times. And this is why we asked him not to go. So to recap, some rogue elements within our own country and military fired a missile at the president on Sunday night. Now, to some of us in the alternative community, this will come as no surprise. To the average guy on the street and many of the soldiers under their command, this idea is preposterous, but it's not. And to take an excerpt from last night's show, and why I appealed, is many people wonder why our military, or so-called military, haven't done something about our situation yet. And the answer is simple. They are not our military. Repeat, not our military. The military is owned by two groups, according to which one you want to believe. The Rothschilds and the Asian families, aka the Chinese elders, or two by the Jesuits via the Vatican since the 15 to 1600s time. And yet we, the American people, pay for it all. Between 700 billion and 1.1 trillion per year. And yet the military doesn't operate on our behalf. In case some don't know, as it stands with their laws, not ours, American troops are not allowed to engage on American soil to defend us. You don't believe me? Check it out yourself. These are the same people that fired weapons at the president, that in the last 2 years sold all American military hardware to an Asian group, not the Chinese government, and have been leasing it back since. Now the Trust, Manor World Holding Trust, has been negotiating with Trump and with Xi for an end to that agreement, and I think it may have been dealt with, but there may be minor things to overcome still. And yet they tell you we're in competition with Russia and China, etc. And here we have top brass within our country selling all our military hardware, which was paid for, again, by the American people, to the so-called enemies of our country. The country's been hijacked. We have no country. United States of America is not our country. United States is a European corporate conglomerate. Nothing to do with America. For those new to the show, we've had no real American government or real constitution since 1871. Again, go and check it out for yourself. It's all there, available on the internet. So we've got no country, because it's called the United States, which is not America. We've got no real government. It's called United States Inc., operating as American government. Doesn't mean to say it is, but it isn't. And we've got no constitution, because they cleverly change words. Constitution for and constitution of are not the same, one and the same. We have 4 constitutions running around, and none of them are the organic constitution that applies to American people. Only United States Inc. people. The reality is we have no enemies in other countries. All of them are working together just to create the illusion of division. Right, next piece. As you may have seen by the picture of Mr. Trump facing Merkel, Macron and May, the 3 M's, sitting in his chair with an FU look, as America is not rejoining the so-called Iran nuclear deal, which is nothing about nuclear and everything to do with oil, and more about looting the American people again than anything to do with nuclear deals. And as we are no longer now funding NATO and the UN at exorbitant levels, or allowing our trades to be undermined by virtually most other major countries, the EU-NATO alliance, aka Nazi group, have gotten all pissy because their cash cow, America, has now cut them off. So they can call Trump all they like, and people in this country can call Trump all they like. But that was protecting American people and its interests, regardless of which party you choose to follow. Although quite why, at this stage, if you're awake, that you're still following party politics is beyond me. So ignore party politics, as whether you like Trump or not, it has and will be good moves for the people of this country. And part of why it has worked is Trump is not a Republican. Trump is just Trump. You may not get it all things right. You have no idea of the pressure he's working under. There's 5 factions all pointing guns at his head, and all kinds of rogue generals telling them you best do this for this faction and this for that faction, and redact this report. when he wants to release all of it. There will be times when I'll be critical if I don't think certain things are done for them by the people, and that's the way it should be. I don't expect everyone to agree to everything. I don't expect everyone to agree with my opinions on this show. But understand the environment that is the White House now is toxic. Next piece. Recent suicides were not suicides at all, or the suspected heart attack either. I'm not saying any more than that. Now, the IG report came out earlier. I've not seen all of it, but I've seen enough of the comments. And as stated on this show a few times, like all the previous reports that was going to bring hell and all, they proffer up nothing that you didn't already know and redact anything that leads to some sort of actions being taken against those responsible. All pure theatre of bad guys calling out other bad guys and all getting away with it. But rest assured, it won't always be this way. And part of why I did the appeal in last night's show. Trump is very limited in what he can say, despite some of the Twitter comments. But not all of us are told to shut up. Maybe it's time the people pondered on something that's been mentioned before, and maybe we can put this forward as a proposal that we should form a new, real American government, not the current USA Inc. Altogether, formed by the people, and leave them with their shallow shadow government, as the funding will go to the real government, not the rogue corporation. It just needs the will of the people to enact it. We want our country back, we want our government back, we want our constitution back, and we want the sovereignty which has been declared for this country implemented. And if we're not going to get it from USA Inc. government, then we'll create our own. Next item. The laptop in the Anthony Weiner case was successfully passed through the courts and signed off on June the 8th this week. And all the papers have now been unsealed. Now, what happens next is anybody's guess, but it's a good start. But will they show it to the public? Well, unsealing it does appear to suggest that. And an unveiling of those details and naming names will ultimately change life, how we know it. The contents of that laptop is beyond description. But for us, it's a confirmation of what we already know. For the rest of the public, the tsunami shockwave will hit hard and last some time. Should it all be revealed, we must be ready to support as much as possible. Now, the outcome of the hidden behind-the-scenes talks between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un had an unexpected twist. apart from not going along with the Asian families. But it's suspected that Trump threw a spanner in the works, given he knew he'd been fired at by troops, American troops, on our own soil. The suspension of provocative war games it holds with South Korea suggests that Trump used that as a fireback to those who think they can play games. Trump said he wanted to see US troops withdraw from the South, and a spokesman for the US forces said they had yet to receive any new guidance on denuclearization, which they'll just carry on and babbling there when they've already gone. He said that Mr. Kim had agreed to it being verified and a key US demand ahead of the meeting. Now, what's that? Hang on a minute. Someone's playing games with the computer. Right, we're back to it. Now, Mr. Trump said Kim had also agreed to an extra bargain of destroying a major missile engine testing site, as well as giving up the nuclear weapons on the sites. But he said sanctions would remain in place for now, and argued we haven't given up anything. That was to appease certain goons pointing guns at his head. Now, several reporters asked whether Mr. Trump had raised the issues of human rights with Mr. Kim, who, according to them, runs a totalitarian regime with extreme censorship and forced labour camps. Oh dear. In my opinion, the USA Inc. reporters has no right to question any other country's human rights when they have neglected the human rights of Americans for the last 70 years. It's staggering hypocrisy on a massive scale. 2 world wars that we had no right to be in. 81 countries invaded in the last 70 years, none of which had attacked America. And those American lives lost in those fake wars is a humanitarian issue completely unaddressed here. That's without ignoring the homeless going missing, thousands of them in the last few years, or 100,000 Americans killed just to get a vaccine for the elites for nuclear fallout, or the 19 million Native Americans killed, or the 500,000 plus American kids that vanish every year, never to be seen again. MK Ultra, I could go on and on. But please start looking closer to home about human rights before railing against other countries, because here is where it all starts. Now, it was, as I said earlier, it was suspected that the cancelling war games was added to the meeting in response to the attack on the president by rogue elements within the USA Inc. military. You want to find out who did it? Look at who shouted the loudest against this measure. When you do know, you'll find out who the problem is. Rothschilds, or the Rothschildians. Oh dear, they've not had a good week. The Rothschilds have been dumping holdings of assets in various companies over the past quarter, but more so in the past week. A vast sell-off, and I mean vast, along with the family estate homes that they had to sell off recently also. Why are they doing this? Because they have nothing left to keep going with. Zilch, nada. No trust to loot anymore. Nothing. You see, it's rather expensive hiring the mainstream media and paying for them, mercenaries globally, spy agencies globally, plus extra security comes with a rather large bill. That's why that family needs money. It's expensive staying in control. It's more expensive when you've lost it and you're fighting to get back in. They're fighting a pointless task. They'll end up with nothing. But this mass sell-off, if that doesn't tell the RV people what's really going on, then nothing will at this point. The Rothschilds are selling fast as they have nothing left in hand. Nothing. Remember me asking you all to target certain individuals online, be it newsreaders or rogue cops that were shooting people in the back, or known pedos, or the so-called elites? Well, according to a report this week, the Rothschildians are not happy. Really? Why? Well, they've complained about the aggressive online conspiracy theorists attacking them. Oh, really, Roths? Calm as a bitch, you know? If you like being bitter, just suck a lemon, will you? Dear me. Those nasty online conspiracy theorists. TikTok, Roths, for you, your family, and your assets, as everything for you and your ilk is entering into this song timeline. Bye. Hi all and welcome back. Final countdown for the Rothschilds family. And good riddance, say one and all. Right, what's next? I know one member is looking forward to this part, Cheryl. So, Tank did a video post on Saturday. It was rather good. I managed to see half of it, and as a reminder to many of the new listeners, and for some who have short-term memory, I thought I would recap of what we are, or in some cases what we were really facing on this planet. Now, the common theme is we just get rid of Bushes, Clintons, Kissinger, Cheney, Blair, Obama, nutty arsehole known as Netanyahu, and Mr. Putin, along with some of the noted names of the former Illuminati, and I did say former, and everything changes when they all go. Wrong. Those names are so far down the list of what is known as the Order by them. They can call it what they like. I'm sure we have far more colourful names to call them than the Order. But I have seen the full list. 6 of the old printer fax length pages. not the A4 size, the extra long ones. And names that you may be familiar with only appear on page 6 and the last couple of inches. Those pages are the order. So here is a full structure of what we are taking on and what we have taken on and winning on many levels currently, despite obvious frustrations of this hasn't happened and that's not happened, which I do understand that. But perhaps after this piece you will begin to grasp the enormity of what has happened and is happening here. From the moment the tribal ancestors signed an agreement with a group known as the Draco from the star system Draconis 16,500 years ago, the Draco are a reptile race. Now I know this aspect disturbs some, as they are uncomfortable with the idea of aliens or ETs, but unless you open yourself up to the possibility of that knowledge into your psyche, you have zero chance of really understanding the bigger picture here. None whatsoever. From 16,500 years on, we've been raped in more ways than just a sexual way, harvested, traded, on and off world, poisoned, sacrificed and looted of the most important thing we have. No, not money. That system is part of their creation of looting our energy and came from the Orion system. All material things, but looted our life force energy and souls on an unimaginable scale. It really is beyond comprehension of what has gone on here, and the lie is so big it's beyond unbelievable, and the average people can just not get their heads around it. The main reason for that is due to externalizing everything in their lives. It's only when you go inside of yourself in an open way, where everything is possible, then you start a very long road to the path of truth. It has many bumps in the road and various side streets that lead to dead ends. This show, in many aspects, has built up knowledge in a stair-stepped way to allow people to begin to grasp it. So the structure, the Draco topped the structure and everything flowed down from there, initially headed by a being known in the Bible as the Lord. The Lord is Anu, the reptilian king. Nothing to do with God or Jesus. It was later controlled via Enki and Enlil and onto the nephew known as M, as in Marduk. He controlled the whole system, either AI or financial. He controlled the trust. And no one else knew the whole structure bar him. All compartmentalized. The financial system was run by analog initially via the IBM system. What you all missed, myself included, is he was telling you who he was and who ran that company. IBM, as in I.B. Marduk. The Draco, the bulk of them anyway, left here back in 2013. Some of them will argue that they left willingly, others no different. They couldn't handle the frequencies, and they couldn't handle the fight back either. But they left M. Marduk behind as a punishment because he didn't follow what they wanted. Except we paid a heavier punishment than he did. That was until November 2016, after an appeal to the council, it was decided we could remove him from here altogether, which was approved, and members of the team ended his reign here altogether. He is no longer a threat. Now, part of the problem for being here is the Draco were lied to by the Abraxans and possibly also the Aldazani group. Both of them are humanoid. And they were told they had no soul. So they then had to use other beings to get a soul. They were lied to. The lies at each level will be a common theme in this piece. The next structure down were known as the parents, an earlier version of human known as 1.0, who were tasked to look after things on behalf of the Draco. They weren't always all here. So they were the parents. They looked after us. And they were told that they were created to look after us, which is a complete and utter lie. Now, the parents live way longer than our current version, and were also much taller and much stronger. The parents were 13 in number. I said that deliberately. And also a further 8 of higher caste or hierarchy, totaling 21. One by one they left or were removed. But it may surprise you that 9 of the last 10 of the parents were females. 4 of the last 5 were females. The only male was an Arab prince. Now, Cassandra was one of the last 4. I'm sure most in THI are familiar with her and the letter by now. And it all went down to 2 and a set of female twins who both came out of stasis and went completely haywire due to the frequency changes here. They went, to use Dave's term, batshit crazy. They are now gone, but as I understand it, they have a VI version of themselves in here, but in reality they're gone. Now, one of those 2 is known as the Red Queen. Some of you may have come across her in Dreamtime. Nasty little biatch that she is. And the main mode of operation of the parents is equivalent to a maze, and we all reside in it. When some people are at the gate of leaving the maze, they distract you and then they move the maze walls. That's what used to go on. This type of interference has now been stopped. Now, the initial 13 parents each controlled a coven. A coven can have a range of members in each one. There may be only a dozen in one and 200 in another. These are the life manipulators, the dark sorcerers, dark magicians, who control the jinns of the lower astral trap. That can have awful effects on the people who encounter them, and they are not easy to shake off. These are the people and beings that play with your spirit during dream time, and use targeting techniques to disrupt people who are breaking free. As a side note, because it is important, Gaia TV is ran by a Coven member. Remember that when you're following Wilcock, Blue Chicken Man, and now David Icke. Coven member operators. Then we come to the Illuminati level, which many are familiar with. That includes groups such as the Council of 300, the UN, the Trilateral and the Bilderberger groups, and a few others. These are the public pawns we take our angst out on so much, but they are the sleight of hand firewall to protect the hidden names. Now, the Illuminati was broken up in the time period 2012-2013 time, around the time that the Draco left, and it morphed into 5 factions, which we did the faction show and details of who and what they are back in 2015. I think that show was kind of ahead of its time, but it gave people a chance going forward to understand how it all worked, because the Illuminati is no more. It's 5 factions, which are Zionist. Not all Jews are Zionists, I want to repeat that. Nazi, not all Germans are Nazis either. The Asian faction, Chinese elders. The Jesuit faction, which is now part of the Vatican. Wasn't always. The Vatican was run by the Nazis for the last 60 years. And the secret societies, P2 Lodge, Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and those ilk. All 5 are vying for control. All 5 don't have the full knowledge. All 5 are now fighting each other's faction. All 5 are now infighting within their own faction. And all 5, who are basically followers, pretending to be leaders, and none of them are. The Rothschilds family, who have the most Draco DNA of all the bloodline families, operate in all 5 factions. So they think they're going to win regardless. TikTok. Well, we have other ideas and plans for that thinking that they have. So the former group known as the Illuminati were put on an extinction order, not by we the people, by the order. The top end. They decided they no longer serve any purpose, and they can carry on with their top 150 to 160 or so people to run things. You see, there's lies at every level. The Illuminati were lied to as well. All of them were promised title of Pindar, aka King of the World. Promised these resources, this corporation, this country, dinar billionaires. All of it was lies. And as far as the king title, whilst he was there was only one king. And he made that quite clear. It was Marduk. Those that followed Putin lasted less than a year and called it BS and quit. Obama and potentially Hitler are working alongside Obama or replacing him. It doesn't matter which. Both are sickos and neither will survive. Lies upon lies upon lies became truth in their world, the same as ours. But many in their world are seeing through the illusion now and have stepped down or deleted themselves. After those whole heap of layers and structures, we come to the public puppets, who are of little to no relevance whatsoever. Lower level pawns used to play the game, that's all. Whose role is to occupy the public with their theatre, and these are known as politicians. Whether they're senators, presidents or prime ministers, all are, or more importantly were, pawns in their game. Politicians are not there to represent the people, only the order. So people can scream at politicians all they like. Even if they wanted to help or change, they are so far down the chain of command. They are on the same level as us. So I hope that gives people a full idea of what we've taken on here. The system, this is important to listen. The system they have only works when there is one controller, and that controller is off-world. Think about that. Cabal take everything and everyone has nothing. So who's going to buy their goods? Keep them in positions of power when they have everything? It only makes sense of looting everything into one giant system at the expense of all others is if you are not from here and you are emptying the whole planet into another system. Then it makes sense to strip everything away. But with M gone, the cabal cannot sustain the current setup as it is. As like the Ouroboros, where the snake eats itself until there's nothing left. This applies on all levels, whether it be finance, resources, land. Eventually, without an external looting system to push it into, those operating on the planet will consume themselves. And this is what's taking place now. They have reached their point of no return. So I hope that helped people understand there's a whole heap more, but I think that's more than enough to get your head round. I mentioned last week about the nuclear vaccine and how 100,000 Americans were used and killed to obtain this vaccine. I've also mentioned many times about a series called The 100, which does cover many of the past aspects of our lives here in far more detail than people realise. Now, in that series, they talk about the Night Blood group and how they survived a nuclear blast on Earth due to their blood type. So the story last week that they killed over 100,000 Americans to achieve a vaccine that made them immune to nuclear fallout makes more sense, doesn't it? Night Blood. Next thing I need to bring up. Many are reporting sleep issues, waking up 2 or 3 times a night, which is consistent with the spirit time of going in and out. So it's not something to be worried about. And people getting tired at different times of the day. My advice is, if possible, take the nap. You may be surprised what is revealed. Well, the reason being is the frequencies have changed and you are experiencing a different time, space and subsequent frequencies. Your body clock and biorhythms are not where they used to be. It's not something to be concerned about, but it will take time to readjust, then readjust and readjust again. Now the reason for the adjust and readjust will be later in the show. Something else I have pondered on, and it's to do with shamans. And there's been a lot of talk about shamans, and I've said it that way for a reason. Shamans, not shamans. And having spoken to many people around the world, most of these shamans appear to be fake. Some will say all are fake apart from the few ancient tribes left, the Aboriginals being one group in particular. And horror stories abound. We had a guest on An Evening with Thomas, Willow Nyatsuma, and the damage that they do, collecting huge sums of money for fakery at best and demonic possession at worst. Now their goal on the front side of it is to collect vast sums of money for your alleged enlightenment, and most of it administered by the power of suggestion rather than real teachings. It is a fact, most of these shamans have only had 1 year's training. North and South America. 1 year. That is not sufficient to cover the arts of that field. So you drink down the poison, whatever potion you ingest, and you go into the spirit realms, where you meet all kinds of garish creatures all waiting to consume you. Or worse, infect you with illness or disease. Most illness, severe illness and severe disease comes from the lower astral realm, including cancer. Or their ultimate goal of inhabiting a vessel. Possession. Now many come away from there all woozy and saying, I feel so much different, lighter and enlightened. Different and lighter, you may say. Have people considered it could be because it's not them anymore? Think about that. Think long and hard on that thought and its implications. What if you're in an under-educated path of journey of self-discovery? You have left your life force in the astral realm, and another person or being walked into the vessel. Could that be the reason why so many say it's life-changing? So what could be happening is your time is up here and your life force is in another time or another realm. Now, I said earlier, Shah-man rather than Shaman for a reason. Shah means time. So ultimately you are working with a time man who operates in and out of time. Now the reality is ultimately we don't belong in the world that's governed by time. When you listen to radio, you are a witness of the everlasting war between idea and appearance, between time and eternity, between human and the divine. Listening to our show, no matter where you are in the world, you are travelling through time. It could be Thursday afternoon to some people now, Thursday evening, or Friday morning, depending on where you live. But in this instance, if you all are listening live now, time stands still and you all go through it. The worst thing you can ever do is take psychedelic drugs. It's inserting you into a world that most people have no idea what they're dealing with. And if you come back with a possession, good luck with getting rid of that. It's not good, and they've been trapping people for a long time. Talking of time, and in particular the sands of time, I may go into more details in this in another show. The egg timer. It goes up and it goes down as you turn it upside down each time through the torus-shaped vessel. The sands of time continue to drop and fall. When it comes to the transition, the key is not to fall. The key is to collect in the centre and go sideways. I may cover more on that in a later show. ADHD. The topic came up recently to do with ADHD. A rather curious acronym for what is essentially a markdown on children coming in with more DNA strands. Some call them star children, indigo, crystal child. But there were children born here in the last 20, 30 years with more of the DNA strands. In essence, more of their so-called junk DNA activated. That junk DNA is where your magic or your abilities lie. And you all have them. But by and large, those receptors have been switched off until you learn to reactivate them. Now, ADHD kids suffer because the vibration here is not conducive for them. A permanent state of feeling off, and so they busy themselves and make lots of noise to cover it all up. Now, once they reach puberty, or just after that, they start to be able to adapt better to the background noise that bothers them so much. ADHD kids walk in two worlds permanently. So they are not paying attention. They're not here. The clowns here know by the signature who these kids are and target them to prevent them developing. And because too many parents have a tolerance level of 0, off they go to the pill pushers known as doctors, and out comes Ritalin. Ritalin is a cord, silver cord, disconnector. It takes you out of the other world and slams you into this one. Say no to Ritalin or any other medication for so-called ADHD kids. They will settle down. Maybe ADHD means altering dimension for higher dimensionals. Think about that. As predicted, the suicide rates of the so-called famous people continues, and it will not stop, in my opinion. They know what they've done, and they know people are coming for them. These people sold their soul for fame, stardom, wealth, and high society lifestyle, and live only for the idolatory energy we the people give them. But essentially these people are lowlifes. It's only our energy that props them up. So public disclosure of their heinous activities will cost them everything they've ever desired. Public worship. Because after that's gone, they have nothing left. No soul, and I mean that. They sold it. No conscience, no empathy, no compassion or love of anyone but their shallow selves. They sold their souls for a shallow existence. And with nothing left but to face public anger and derision, they choose to sell their final thing they have had left: life. You dance with the devil. Sometimes it comes back to haunt. Next piece. Ronald Bernhard, the Dutch banker. I kept getting asked about this, and I received opinions from Holland that supported both sides. One saying he's fake and the other saying he's doing good. Now, I just don't have the time normally to watch any videos on the internet, or very few of other people's material. You know, it takes me all the time trying to keep going in my own life with the THI show, the 2 social media pages, the People's Club, the Intel and the think tank groups, and a load of other stuff. But I decided I would take the time to listen to a 2.25-hour interview of him and finally make up my own mind based on that one interview. And what came out of it is he was a social climber, not bothered of who or what he trampled on to get to the top. And a relentless ego-driven lifestyle that enabled him to be in the inner circle, or close enough to it anyway, to garner some of their knowledge, some of the top-end people, the order. Now, he described the more familiar pyramid system of control, which is the public version in limited form, but the top part has another layer in and of itself. And he said in the video it's basically 8 to 8,500 people who run the whole world for their own ends. Now, he lived the typical high roller life those inside those circles live, and he admitted he thought life was great. He attending ceremonies of naked girls, free booze and drugs and total debauchery parties, until something hit his world and the proverbial brick wall. So what brought it back into some sort of reality? They asked him to sacrifice children. And his whole mask of illusion collapsed in on himself. That life of his ended from the moment he refused to do so. Whether he was aware of it at the time or not, you don't refuse psychopaths. He then, reading between the lines, endured a life of hell, inside and outside of him. Threats to not reveal his secrets, and yet, through it all, he somehow survived. And this is perhaps one of the things that makes some people suspicious of him. Other aspects are he won't reveal too much of his first life before the sacrifice request. Some people have looked into him and he's not on this register and not on this certificate or recorded on other things, and all that raises suspicions. Well, until you walk yourself in another person's shoes, how can you make a full assessment on that person's life? If he revealed the full details, he would likely be dead now. Revealed inner circle names, groups, meetings, all would likely equal death. Would you, the listener, reveal that if that threat was over your head? Well, would you? Think about it. Bearing in mind the fact that revealing this stuff, most people sadly choose to ignore it, or worse, dismiss it. Which he did allude to in the interview, and I agree. He said something in the last part of his interview of how much proof do people need to stand up. I think most people know now. I've been saying the exact same thing for a while now, and more so recently. It really is staggering the depths people require of proof and truth, even when they've already been given it. So the fact that he chose to not say certain things for safety of himself and others around him is a valid reason, in my opinion. And if people don't get that aspect by now, you really haven't woken up as much as you thought you had. Because it's all hidden doesn't mean to say it's not dangerous. Those at the top end get threats, death threats, because you live that life. So we all want this information and that information and inside information, but very few are responsible with it, and therein lies the problem. People spitting it out for clickbait on shows and getting people killed. Yes, you, Mr. Wilcock. And he admitted it on one of his shows. That ruins whole plans. It's difficult enough making any sort of plans when you don't know who you're fighting, largely. Is this politician working for the people, or is he working secretly for one of the factions? Nobody knows. You walk into Langley, personally, the amount of times I've slagged Langley off, you want to detonate the whole lot. But there's loads of people in there who want what we want. It's not like the old days where the Brits came over with red coats and Americans all wear blue coats. You have no idea who's who anymore. So if civil war ever broke out in this country, nobody would know who they were fighting at or whether they should defend. It's a big problem. And trusting anyone is an even bigger problem. So what happened with the Kingdom of Manor people? You know? But I and many others put our necks on the line to bring you the truth, knowledge, and occasionally proofs. And I and others have had death threats for doing that. All for people to become better informed. And yet sometimes the slightest thing, like what happened with Mr. Bernhard, they disagree with, they jump and complain over this and that. And the hardest thing ever is to tell people the truth. We all know this too well. We also know many don't want to hear the truth, even some in the awake community. Often it can be the case they want their version of the truth only. So if someone outs another alternative media person for being rogue and not telling the truth, they react badly as though it's their fault. All projection. But deep down, each and every one of you knows when you are being bullshitted. But it's a comfortable version some want to hear. I so wanted to believe Neil Keenan, but my inner intuition was screaming from October 2013 onwards. I can blame Drake for saying that he had vetted him, but in reality that's not fair either, as that is putting the responsibility of my own reputation in the hands of somebody else. Truth, proof and trust all comes down to personal responsibility that each of us has to observe, process, collect or release depending on what is available. But you can't learn anything or move forward without trust and knowing yourself. This is the key to all. You will always stay in the realms of impossible rather than I'm possible. Now, Ronald Bernhard seems a genuine enough guy. Could he be acting? Always a possibility, as they've often used actors to play certain roles. The key to him is how he comes across in the now, not in the past. All of us have made mistakes in life, and the key is to learn from them, not pillory yourself, or worse, project it onto others. He has took personal responsibility for his past and will be paying his own dues for the rest of this lifetime. And he knows that. But he wants to step out and help others do the same by giving us an insight into the hidden circle. That must be heard regardless of what you believe Ronald to be or not. He knows trust is hard to come by, and the best way to do that is be observed in his actions. Words can lie. Actions and sincerity will always find you out eventually. I say give the man some slack and listen with an open mind and heart. Ignore the past and focus on the now. Maybe we can get Ronald to come on our show sometime, as it will give people a better chance with someone interviewing him who also knows how the top end work and operate. The reality is, if Bernhard is an actor and all the tears are theatre, it won't be long before that is shown up as fake. Masks of illusions are all coming down. People are starting to get the feelings of others a lot more now, and genuine people are starting to be seen, heard and felt. People know by my own tone and delivery of how I feel on a particular show. Ronald appears to be genuinely remorseful of his past and has a desire to correct it. We should all admire that spirit and endeavour. No one goes through life squeaky clean, and we should all reach out and pull up those who chose to operate in a better way and keep reminding them of their past. This is why this show appealed to Wilcock, Corey Good, Keenan, Anna Von Wright to step down from who they were working for and come and help. Kim and the team have spoken to Rothschilds, Bushes, the Koch brothers, Jared Rand and the Rand Company, Wells Fargo and many other top CEOs of rogue banks, to name but a few. Step down and come and help us all. In essence, those people are the perfect vehicle to get on board, as not only are we removing their numbers, we're adding to our own. It's a double win. And in many of those cases, people who have worked for the Cabal or the Order, Illuminati or the Covens and decided to go a different path, are a lot more fierce in their determination to help correct it. Yes, it may be selfish where they feel they have to fulfill and play out their karma, but we gain. Now, since I did that piece, which was last weekend, Ronald has appeared on ITNJ, I think. I have issues with that particular group, given Robert David Steele is connected to it, and it appears they're trying to jump over the work of Kevin Annett. So we're going to be watching that closely. But if people of Holland want to speak to Ronald and get him to come on the show, I'll set up a slot. It may be of big assistance in some avenues, certainly in the banking fields. Last op-ed piece. For the past 5 to 6 weeks, we've had an increase of source energy that has been added to this planet, and it is spreading globally. This explains some of the changes you are seeing, feeling within yourself and those around you. It was designed to be an awakening tool for the masses, including the Cabal. A reconnection back to source that has been blocked in various manners over a prolonged period of time. And for most in the awake community and those still not mired in religious dogma, this will have a good effect once it is absorbed. As for the others, it will leave them confused and irritated, but it will bring long-term beneficial effects to them as well. I wouldn't totally describe it as a wheat and chaff separation, but it will have that effect. But providing those people have done their inner work and integrated their shadow aspects, it can be adapted to fairly quickly. Those resonating with a higher frequency will obviously feel greater benefits in the now, and the rest will be filtering through as time goes by. Those energies, or these energies, will increase incrementally over time to provide maximum benefit going forward. It can't be stopped. So go outside and absorb it all in. Collect it and store it within you. And transmute it for the benefit of all. And I heard a lot of people saying, well, how do you do that? Well, when you go out on a sunny day and look at the sky, a clear day, although you can see it, even despite the chemtrail blocking, you squint your eyes a bit and just stare at the sky. Eventually you will see thousands of very small golden pieces floating down from the sky. They're darting here and there. That is source energy. Learn to collect it and pull it into you, pull it down into the solar plexus, and then push it up through your heart to the crown with a thought of then transmuting it for maximum effect. Over time, this exercise will not be required, as we will be bathed in it. But this can be a tool for you and others in the now that can bring better changes. Hi all, and welcome back to the final portion of tonight's show. I'm going to run through a couple of questions after the show last night. Fairly packed one tonight, a lot to take in. I think we're going to answer a few questions and then call it quits for this week. Thomas, they plan in September. They can plan whatever they like, it won't work, to change the monetary system and bring UN troops in for martial law. Did you not say the UN is disbanded and no longer functional? Why are they lying to us? They can plan whatever they like to change the monetary system. The reality is the trust controls it, and they're trying their utmost to regain that. They're not very successful. In fact, they're not successful at all. And I suspect, whilst there was reports this week it may get released soon, well, we've all heard soon far too many times, and in my opinion, it gets released when it's ready. No dates, no timelines. To me, the most important thing is we are allowed the time to get it right. Not that it's coming next week or this week or that next month. To me, whilst I would love the foundation to start, I would like to have started 12, 18 months ago when we first set it up. But it's not safe to do so. When you've got rogue elements on our own soil firing missiles at the president's plane, you realise there's far deeper problems than funding, and they have to be addressed. As for September, in my opinion, the appeal that went out last night, those people have 3 months to correct it. We do have other methods that will force them to correct it. We're giving them a choice. Do the right thing. We do have 5 or 6 other big plans, big hammers that can be unveiled if they don't do the right thing. Your choice. You love your country? Prove it. Not sing about it or wave flags. Prove it. You owe it to the American people. As for martial law, they've been trying to wield that out many times. They've all failed. And the UN has been disbanded and is under the official control of Manor World Holding Trust. But the Rothschilds still think that they run everything, and some people who have haven't learned to grow a set still think they're some sort of god. Yeah, a god with a weakening asset base by the second. They own nothing. So that's kind of what's playing out. The UN has been sold off and given the funds returned to the countries it belonged to, that it was stolen from. But they are playing a game of illusion, that everything is still in place. It's not. It's an illusion. But I suspect things, if something hasn't happened, an event of some description, by September, all hell will break loose. And we will wield out big plans, whether they like it or not. You mentioned that the new banking system is open and transparent for everyone to see. Could you please define what you mean by open and transparent? Well, a bank manager could go and access the account to a certain point, but he doesn't have access to what the transactions that are going on the hidden banking system, the black screens. All those black screens are now gone. The mirrored accounts where banks are looking, top CEOs of banks are looking at a bank in so many billion in the black, and when they all went down on December around solstice time, they all found they were a couple of billion in the red. Fake accounting. So the new system does away with the black screens and it's all open and transparent. As for private persons being able to trace money moving through the system, it depends on, I would suggest no, but there may be certain elements where you are able to track that your money you've sent by wire has been received. And the biggest change is that everything will become live banking. With the clearance accounts closed down, there's no filtering money where they keep it for days on end. You send a payment, it goes out instantly, and the person receives it instantly. Not 4 days holding, or 10 days holding, or the wire didn't arrive, and all the other nonsense and lies they came up with. So that's the definition of open and transparent. Is the new banking system currently open right now for everyone to see? Is it partly locked down, a mixture of both? I'm aware that the old closed banking system is still in use where transactions are being done on dark screens. I don't think that's ongoing. I can check, but I don't think that's possible anymore. And that the new banking system is not fully implemented. There is, in the main it is. There's just certain aspects that need to be tidied up. Who is taking care of the president? Good question. I think we answered that before. Over there it was black dragon groups that are not good, and certain generals around and putting them in danger, like Kelly. Yes, he's mired in the midst of clowns and factions, which makes his life very, very restricted, and that's why we played that song at the beginning of this show and why I did the show last night. What about General Dunford? Exactly. It's Mr. Loop, 4-year loop newsman. Dunford was saving the world 4 years ago, like, what was it, General Ham, 4 years before him. We're still waiting. Sure, I answered this recently. How is it they can get away with a 4 billion theft? Because there was still access. The firewalls were not put in. The new system had not been fully implemented, so they could still go into clearance accounts and then loot it out. So that explains that. Do you think that these unknowns, but now on Rush Limbaugh, exposure unfair trade tariffs since World War II that cost the American taxpayer tons of money, our money, are going to greatly hurt the child trafficking industry's funding, and Trump's yes, Mexico will pay for the wall, believe me. Is that how that wall funding will happen? The trade tariffs are all about a long-term plan as far back as World War II and the Bretton Woods, and as far back as 1912, to put it precisely, where the Federal Reserve would run the Western banking system for 100 years, and then it would be transferred over to China. So the Federal Reserve would become out of Beijing. And that should have took place on the December of 2013, which obviously it didn't. And it was a continuation of the old programs. And so eventually they knew that they would have to collapse America totally. And part of these tariffs were part of that. So America couldn't trade. America was left with no manufacturing, and then everything transferred to the east, and America collapsed into a third world country. That was the plan. Well, that's not going too well, is it? As for the wall, we told Trump how to use that money to fund the wall. He didn't listen. I don't think he'll make that mistake again, and that's why the crowdfunding, it means it can't be stolen until the new banking system is fully implemented and live. In some aspects it's already live. It can transfer money to the governments, but there's other aspects still to be worked out. We have to get it right, simple as that. And if that takes 12-18 months, so be it, in my opinion. We then have 12-18 months to get rid of the clowns that like to interfere, that are blocking funding and stalling the growth of this planet and its people. But Mexico itself will not be paying for the wall. The trust will be paying for the wall. What plans are in... no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to end on that. Will a private person be able to see if the pension and the social funds are still intact? If private persons make donations to a charity, for example, will they be able to follow up on that charity to make sure the donated money is being used as promised? Or do you need some kind of banking license to access the system in order to do so? I don't think that will be possible. In essence, you're relying on the person that runs the charity. And we all know all of the big name charities are all rogue, and they're all funneling money back to the cabal. Less than 5% of it, and it may even be less than that, is going to the causes it's stated. It's just one giant cash loot. You know, I've tried to do things different with the foundation, and it will continue when the funding arrives. Everything's going to be open and transparent. I've showed people bank accounts, what came in and what got spent out. I've got nothing to hide. Like they said, fear never fears investigation. So people want to investigate where the foundation money's gone or how much is in it now. I'll answer them. Show them the bank account. Because that's, to me, is how you do business. That's how you generate genuine trust. The charity money doesn't belong to them, no more than the foundation money belongs to me. It belongs to you. And you have invested it for certain purposes, whether that's cancer charities, all of which are rogue, because all of them know that there's been a cure for cancer since 1928 and are just looting the public's money. And or animal cruelty, unless it's a very small private unit in a close community. It's yet again going to fill the pockets of greedy people. The first thing you'd ask is how much the CEO of that charity is making per year. If it's over 6 figures, they're raping the charity. I've run the foundation for 2 years now, and my earnings from it is zero, because there's not enough in it. When the funding comes through, then I will get a wage out of it. But until then, I just carry on. That's up to us all to be that. You know, it's all right asking for banks to be, governments to be transparent, but we have to be, as people, have to learn to be transparent as well. We're going to end up doing that regardless. The masks of illusion are coming down whether we like them or not. And it's up to you, if you don't feel that you're the best as a person, to change that image. If you don't like what you see, you're responsible to change that perception. So we can all go forward. But the first thing is you have to trust yourself. And that's something far too many people don't do. So if you can't trust yourself, how can you trust anybody else? You can't. So the key for trust and transparency is for us all to apply. And that's called personal responsibility. And if everyone enacted personal responsibility, the world's ills would end overnight. Literally. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. There's a lot in it. Some heavy things to ponder on. Some positive things with the source energy. That goes deeper than I portrayed in tonight's show. Trust me. Something to ponder on time and shaman. Nightblood. Sleeping issues, and you've now got the full story of the control structure and the order. So in a week that the media has chosen to ignore rogue elements firing at the President of America, maybe last night's show and that information was the shot around the world that people required to step up and go forward with. It is having an effect. We hope it has actionable effect. It needs it. Can't all sit there in top brass offices pushing pens around. You have a duty and obligation to the American people and also to the rest of the world that the military industrial complex and the USA Inc. military have goose-stepped all around the world for the last 70, 80 years. That has to stop. Badges and medals for peace are far better than badges and medals for killing people. Just needs a change of mindset. If it's budgets you're worried about, we've told you, your budget's there. It can even be increased. But not 1 cent of it is going on war. This world and this country in particular has paid a heavy price, not only financially, but with heavy losses to its sons and daughters fighting wars with no end and no purpose, only to fulfill psychopathic control systems that was basically looting the whole planet. Now that entity is gone, why are we looting the planet that we all live on? You will and are the Ouroboros, the snake that eats itself. You carry on with your unsane plans, you will eat yourself and there'll be nothing left. We have a chance and an opportunity to go forward as a species and do things in a better way. Fair, transparent, abundance in basic needs for the benefit of all, including the planet and the other beings that are here, far more than many people realise below your feet. All have been at war for many hundreds of thousands of years, because all have been lied to. The lies have to stop and the truth has to come forward. And all of us have a responsibility to push that forward. Those of you in the military and the agencies have a greater responsibility. You owe the American people big time. You build the platform for peace and the people will come. We've been waiting for a long time. Don't make us wait too much longer, because we will act. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. I hope you've enjoyed it. And remember, we can make it together the way old friends do. Bye for now.